Hi, my name's David Gill. I'm the Chief Scientist at Cannasouth. My background is as a pharmaceutical scientist working in major pharmaceutical companies for over 40 years. My role here at Cannasouth is to look at the research and development activities from the basic research all the way through to product development. The New Zealand market for cannabis is still very, very new. And very focused, like other countries, on the herbal side of the products, so the CBD, THC, oils and flowers. But that market is developing rapidly, as we see in other countries around the world. The flowers are an interesting market, so there is a big demand across the world for flower. In New Zealand, flower can be taken through a medically approved vaporizer. So that is an emerging market in New Zealand. At the moment, like I said, we're focused on the herbal side of the medicines. So the extracts, the CBD and THC in, well, what are relatively simple pharmaceutical forms, oral drops and tinctures and things. As we move forward, the industry will likely divide up and become much more refined, not just in the herbal space, but in the true pharmaceutical space. So we'll be looking at trying to discover new molecules from the plant and also to maximize the usability of the existing molecules, the CBD and the THC. So converting those into new formats that maybe doctors and patients are much more used to. That's quite a complex space. So initially, we are focused on the simpler products, so the oral oils and things, and that is so we can get products to patients as quickly as possible and cost effectively. So what we've done in R&D is to look at some imported products. So they're imported from other markets that are probably more developed than New Zealand. So that saves time in getting products to patients. And that also allows us time in the background to start developing our own in-house products and new technologies. So Cannasouth is on the hunt for new molecules in addition to the CBD, THC, like I've said. And what we're doing there is some really clever stuff. So we have taken extracts from various different species of cannabis, and we've looked to find new compounds or existing compounds within those extracts. And then from that, we can put those molecules into what we call receptor studies. So they're computational studies where we take the chemical structure of the cannabinoid and we see if we can match it with receptors within the body that have known function. That way we can screen lots and lots of molecules. We can look at potential efficacy and safety of those compounds. But it does take a lot of computing power. So to help us with that, we've got a university collaboration, and we're also using one of the supercomputers to help us to analyze all that data that's being generated. We are expecting to get some output from those studies by the end of this year. In terms of getting the molecules out of the plant, Cannasouth has invested heavily in some very high-tech extraction technologies. So we're using the supercritical fluid chromatography amongst others. Some of the equipment we have, we believe, is some of the only equipment of its type in Southern Hemisphere. This enables us to pull out small quantities, research quantities of almost any bioactive from a plant source. So those compounds we can then use in preclinical studies. Now that might be through our computational models or through biological models to test for efficacy and hopefully identify new therapeutic uses for those compounds. One of the big interests for Cannasouth is in neuropathic pain. Now, neuropathic pain is a real unmet need in the world, with something like 7% of the world's population suffering with some form of neuropathic pain. That equates to over 300,000 people in New Zealand and over 16 million people in the US. The conventional medications either are quite ineffective or they have really bad side effect profiles that some patients can't tolerate. And so we've got a big interest in that space. And again, we're in collaboration with the university looking at developing biological models to test those cannabinoids to see if and how they work in neuropathic pain models. So again, that work is already ongoing, and we're into year 2 of those studies. So hopefully again within the next year we should have some much better understanding on how these molecules actually work in neuropathy. There are lots of products on the market for lots of conditions. So if, for example, you take pain therapies, there's probably only a few molecules used to treat pain in the world. It might be paracetamol and aspirin and non-steroidals and the opiates. So 4 or 5 molecules. But if you think there are hundreds, perhaps even thousands of products that come from those molecules, and they're targeted to different therapeutic indications and in different formats. So they might be in tablet, patches, injections, inhalation products, all those things. That's no different to Cannasouth working on the cannabinoids. So looking at the most effective way to treat a particular condition and to deliver that drug. Now, we do have a very significant in-house drug delivery project where we're looking at some of these advanced systems to get the best efficacy from the smallest amount of drug. And you can do that by looking at different routes of administration and different formulation types. That project is well advanced at Cannasouth, and we're looking at things like nanotechnology. We're looking at different routes of administration. I can't give any details on that, obviously, because that's pretty confidential and potentially subject to intellectual property going forward. The reason for doing those preclinical studies in computer models and biological models is to understand how the molecules work in patients. But to really prove that, we will need to go into patients at some time. Now, before you jump into a clinical trial, you have to have identified the therapeutic indication that you're trying to work with. You have to be able to provide confidence, I suppose, that you're going to meet that primary endpoint in the clinical trial. So Cannasouth is definitely going to be looking at clinical trials going forward, but we will be using our preclinical data to ensure that we're looking at the right type of trial in the right patient cohort and making sure that we've got the right clinical endpoint. So you need to get that right and ensure that the journey you embark on is the right journey, and you've got a really good chance of success at the end of it. The benefit of doing these trials is that the products at the end will be approved products. So they will have everything that the doctors are looking for. They'll have the safety, the efficacy, they'll have defined doses, defined administration routes, all those things that doctors are looking for with their conventional medicines. The other benefit is once a product has been approved, then there is the potential for funding. So you could get funding for those products as well through the likes of Pharmac and other funding bodies. So again, that will then help to reduce the cost of some of those medicines going forward. Having that strict regulatory pathway is not a bad thing. And I think a lot of the discussion around how difficult those hurdles are is because the industry is still quite new and there is still a rush to get products to market. Companies need to get products to market, but as we start to develop more and more of those products, then we become more aligned with the regulations. And of course, as we move forward, the regulations and the development practices within the industry will merge together, I believe. Like I said, these products will become more and more like pharmaceutical products, and therefore will really need to meet the conventional regulatory pathway for pharmaceuticals.